Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
All right, just having some music in the background here. And
Yeah. So Dave should be in a minute here.
oh,
I'm
yes.
gonna-
Hello, hello.
Yeah.
I'm just going to close my door. My son is playing in the hallway. And open some window. Here we go.
All right. I'll be right with you.
Hello, Frode. I'm Dave Boyer.
Hello, hello.
I'm associated with David LeBeau and
Good.
Highlighter.
That may get you in trouble.
I think David is working on something.
I'll be right there.
Okay. I am recording this meeting. I hope that's okay.
Yeah.
And now you're at the beach.
Yeah. There we go. That's where I am now. We moved
I am
from
still in my garage.
the mountains of Vermont to that's just down the street from where I'm at right now.
Very good.
Yeah. So let me. Do you want to? I don't know if other people are going to join us, but maybe
I have
Frode,
no
you could.
idea either.
Yeah. So maybe you could give Dave a little of your background, and he'll share his with you.
Sure. Yeah, I've been working with text for a very long time. I was lucky enough to have Doug Engelbart be my friend and mentor, and he called text symbol manipulation. And it surprised me for a long time how little effort is put into advancing text interactions. So that's why I've now been hosting 9 years worth of the Future of Text Symposium, which has been always small groups, always great groups, once a year, America, UK. And I've edited the Future of Text book, which has 450 pages and about 150 contributions on varied perspectives from technology, industry, academia, and the arts on potential futures of text. And I also make a word processor and a PDF reader as part of putting my money where my mouth is.
So David showed me those applications. I immediately went and downloaded them and installed them.
Thank you.
They were, are you familiar with the name Jeff Raskin?
Yes.
Okay. The Humane Interface, I think, is one of his books. He was the guy, I believe, who helped to design the original Mac interface.
He started
anyway,
the project.
Say it again.
Yeah, he did start the Mac project, but then there were all kinds of politics things. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of my favorite books is The Humane Interface, just in terms of how it really pushes on your thinking to really consider the medium as actually the user, not the computer, right? You're thinking about how the user works, not how the computer works. And when I saw your interface, the simplicity, the cleanness of it. And what I said to David is, it looks to me like an interface designed for mastery, not for not for the novice, if that makes sense. It's just, there's a cleanness to it
That's the
Yeah.
goal, and thank you for noticing that. It is exactly,
Yeah.
it is, the design principle is tools at your fingertips, information
Yes.
at your eyes, not tons of weird little icons that limit your vocabulary. So yes.
It was beautiful. Yeah, when I saw all the keystrokes and everything was off the menus, and it's just clean right there. It was just gorgeous. So anyway, yeah.
Thank you.
My background, software development, for, I guess, I started when Java appeared, so in the mid 90s. And before this, I was with IBM, and I left there, and I guess, oh wow, it's 2013 now. I joined Dave in 2014 as an independent consultant, and I've been working with him ever since. I left IBM to become a better programmer, to really challenge myself. Also because they didn't necessarily have room for me. The teams I was with were going in different directions that I wasn't interested in.
Where were you with IBM?
I was with Rational. We got purchased. I was with a company called Telelogic, which was based out of Sweden. They had bought a number of product design and development tools, so change management systems, modeling systems, and Rational Tools was like the big competitor, and IBM had bought Rational a number of years before. So I think in 2005 they bought us, and maybe it's 2005 I joined them, and then they bought it. I joined Telelogic, and then in 2009 I think they bought us, or somewhere in that period. And so when we joined Rational, we basically, we were basically about 3/4 of the size of Rational. And so we almost doubled the size of Rational when we joined, when they bought us. And so they got a whole bunch of tool suites. I ended up on the team that did Team Concert, Rational Team Concert. The team that built the Eclipse IDE, are you familiar with that?
No,
Eclipse? It's a Java development environment. It's open source. But that team ended up taking the internal architecture, turning it into a server platform, and then building out this set of tools, a web interface. Rational Team Concert was a change management system and a bug tracking, testing, requirements management system. And so I worked on that system for about 4.5 years before I left. I was in the web front end. So anyway.
Yeah. So as far as an agenda that we have for Road, so let me just give you a little background. We're expecting to have a commercial release of our product that, you know, I described to you last time 2 weeks ago. And we really believe that we are filling a major gap in the IT landscape with this multi-document sense-making application. And the deeper we get into it, the more kind of fascinating it gets from a learning science and neuroscience perspective. Because what we think we've built is the world's first frame building tool. So basically, you in creating a narrative structure from pieces of information that you're pulling in from many different sources and arranging into a storyline, you're reifying your internal frame of, and you can look at things like coherence between adjacent highlights in our storyline that we're creating, which is almost like a storyboard, and how well have you made the transitions from spot to spot and so forth.
Have you actually showed it to him?
No, not yet. So, but let me just say what I was thinking when I saw your product or products. A little kind of a little bit paradoxical to what Dave was saying, in that we have our first customer for Highlighter is a guy by the name of John Katzman. He started Princeton Review He started 2U, which is the big online program management company in that sector.
Hmm.
And then he started Noodle Partners because he didn't like the economic model of 2U, and he thought it was a kind of ripping off the university. He's a very strong-minded person. At any rate, he has agreed verbally, he said he put it in writing, to a contract, a license highlighter for his system. And right now they have somewhere around 20 to 25 universities that they do business with. So you know what OPMs do, they set up, like if you're University of Southern California and you want an online master's program in social work, you bring in Noodle Partners or one of these other companies, and they work with your faculty not only to build the system, but to help you market it and get it up and running and so forth, right? And so he had his learning scientist come in and for the demo with Highlighter, and she said, oh, we don't have anything like this. This would be great. And what they told us was we need two things. One is a reference manager, which was on our roadmap, but for the university setting, that's a critical piece. And
Interesting.
the other thing that John said, and this gets into your bailiwick, he said, look, David, you know, and this guy has got, 30 years of experience in this area, ed tech. My experience is if a product takes more than 5 minutes to learn how to use to get some value out of it, it's not going to get adopted. And, I'm not, he likes to squint his face and look at me and I'm not sure that, what I'm seeing with the full highlighter is something that, students, the majority of students would jump into. Now, the fact is we have some feedback now from people that they get it very quickly because the university setting, you have a captive audience. It's not like, here, start using it. The teacher says, okay, I'm going to spend 20 minutes and you're going to watch how to use this. And by the way, if you don't use it, you'll flunk the course, right? So but still, it's very good advice because in a corporate environment, it doesn't necessarily work that way. Or if somebody wants to just download it. So what we had talked about was, and this is partly Dave's idea, was you open a document when you're first starting out and it looks like your UI. There's nothing. You highlight.
Do you want to do a screen share?
A
walkthrough, or do you want to talk it through first?
Well, right now, so I'll show you the product, but from what I just let me just finish. I just have like a minute to just set this up and then let's do a screen share. The idea is that you start off with a very simple online annotation system. You highlight something, box comes up, you put in your comment, you see the highlighting, you click, it shows you the comment. So if in a collaborative setting, you would just see the highlights from yourself and other people, and we have this color coding thing. And then the idea is that as you want to add additional capabilities, there are buttons that you push, and up pops the left margin, and then the right margin, and then other capabilities, right? So that you have this sort of incremental complexity as you need those features. But initially, we can describe how to use the product in 2 sentences. Capture an area of text and submit your comment, click on a highlight and see the comments associated with it. And that's all you need to know to start. Now, you want to do this, click this, you want that, and so forth. So ironically, in a way, is that Dave looked at so I was kind of like, oh, Dave looked at your interface and he said, oh, this is what experts want. And I was looking at it and thinking, oh, well, this is what a beginner wants, right? So at any rate, so that's the starting point for the conversation. And, I don't know, whether or not, just where this might go, whether, you might become a consultant to us or something, or we just have a conversation, whatever. I mean, we're open to different possibilities. But as, Dave said, the mind that created the products that you shared with us is probably a mind that could be very helpful to Highlighter as we go forward.
That's not, I said is the mind that created that is a mind I want to interact with. That's what I said.
Well, I put it in more pragmatic terms.
Yeah. I'm curious, to hear your perspective on things based on that interface. So
do you want I can give you like a quick 5-minute run through of the product just so you can.
Just show it, Dave. Bring it up.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
let's see, share
I,
screen.
I've given you sharing, whatever it's called, privileges or whatever it's
Yep,
called.
got it.
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay, let me get rid of this.
Can you briefly tell me about this reference manager that they wanted?
Oh, so you import documents, and that was another thing that you have in your system. When you import a document, you know, we have a bulk import thing where, you know, you go to a folder and then you just select the documents that you want to import, and then they show up on this dashboard. Now this is, actually this is going to change, but so you can see I've got 276 documents, and I have all these panels, starting with panel 1, and I can navigate my panels and see the documents I have. And the reference manager would be all of the, whatever information is available, if it's a journal article or a book or something, you know, formally published, you know, we would want to capture all that information.
It's the equivalent of the citation information, basically.
Yeah, that's what it's the site. Yeah.
Yeah, no, the
Well, that's
reason
what a reference is. A
I'm
reference
asking
is
is
citation.
because I'm working to kill the need to have reference managers.
Okay.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's interesting.
By embedding the metadata.
Yeah, with visual meta, that's exactly. However, let me just ask you some questions. Is your system web-based or is it, okay, web-based, right?
And also we take the PDF or whatever the native file is and convert it into standard HTML, XHTML.
Because sorry, I know this is a bit of a segue, but if there was a system that what it did was sniff your clippings, obviously the user would have to, sorry, your clipboard, the user would have to give permission, but every time it comes across a citation or a DOI, just automatically puts it into the reference manager. Stuff you have looked at today, you may have forgotten to import it, because I think the import aspect is just so stupid. I mean, we have to do it with pictures to an extent, but with a smartphone and a computer, you don't even have to do that anymore.
Yep.
So, okay, just a side thing. All right, thanks.
Well, so related, so, okay, so I'm gonna take you through, you know, this can take an hour, but I'm gonna do it in less than 5 minutes, okay? Just so you get the, so you see, we call this a session. I imported a document, and now it's just a simple annotation system at this point where I highlight, I put in a comment, you know, and it displays in the margin, and it gives my name, date, time stamp. Somebody can come in and reply, so you can have, you know, threaded discussions, and it just indicates that this is a child. And you can add tags, you know, to the what we call a highlight. So the highlight is the highlighted text, which is emphasized here and emphasized here, with a comment. So whether it's the reply, and then if, you know, you just navigate by clicking down through, and you can do things like add links to other documents. You can add links to other highlights, which I won't go into this in depth, but I can do start link, and I can go to any document in the system and add.
Just do it, Dave.
Okay, so I go.
Just do it. Showing is so much better than telling.
Right. So
So
start link.
the start link is creating an anchor, right?
Yeah, here. Then I go to a different document in the system, go to a different highlight, and I just go end link. And now I've got a two-way link between where I started. So this is extremely powerful way of saying this idea over here is related to this idea over here, and then
Yeah,
you just
no
in the
question.
comment explain.
Absolutely, yes.
Now, just real quickly, I'm just going to go to a different. This site has mostly.
I'm not sure about the language though.
Go ahead.
I'm
Okay,
just,
well that's yeah.
wondering because end seems finish, stop, and cut off, get away.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's something like complete link.
Yeah, I like that's a good.
Yeah,
point.
yeah. We just, that's a relatively new feature, and we haven't
Iterated on it yet.
yeah, so that's a good point. Yeah, okay. So one of the things that we actually have a patent on, and we originally thought we would build the company around this because we thought it was such a cool feature, is that anything I highlight but nobody else did appears in yellow to me as the logged in user. Things that other people highlighted appear in blue, and where there's overlap is green. So with this little yellow, blue, green color coding mechanism, you can have threaded conversations across a document with 100 people without creating a mess. So when I click on this,
And of course, yellow plus blue is green. So that's nice.
exactly. So who knew that what I learned in the first grade was going to, build an empire around it, right? So you see, when I click here, you see Janice made a comment. I replied to it, so it's green, right? This one is just blue because it's just Anna. You can tell Anna list. These are, any rate.
Hang on, that's a really good point you made. You replied to someone's comment. Is there a way that you can explicitly see questions?
Yes, you tag them. So you use the question tag.
So right now, if I may, right now we're using the tag feature as your catch-all for what I would call a soft grouping. And so a question, identifying questions would be a way of doing soft grouping. We're not doing any internal text analytics yet,
But we will.
in order to identify in a different way. But the whole point of this is really to come up of this system. What I did when I came here is I said to Dave, we really need to get clear on the underlying data model, the representation and what it is we're trying to represent. Because if we can get clear on the data structures that we're trying to talk about, then we can actually think abstractly about operating on those data structures, working with them, right? And so the highlight is a combination of pointing at something and saying why you pointed at it. Point at, point of. Okay, so the metadata you associate with the highlight is the point of. The fragment is the thing you point at, whether it's a section of video, a section of an image, or a portion of text, right? And those two things are, this is the thing I'm looking at, this is the set of claims I've made about it. Together, that represents a unit of sense making that we call the highlight. And then when we do the aggregation, you see a list, an arrangement of highlights, and that begins with an ordering, begins to take on the nature of a narrative if a human being does it. But it could be search outcomes weighted by relevance if a search engine did it, right? And so now we have a mechanism for creating arrangements of units of sense making, and that's your erector, your Lego parts. And so the tag feature is about, so with information, it's all about finding ways to create networks between nodes, right? And so there's hard linking, which is like actually putting a direct link. Like this highlight, this comment right here, that one of the ones Dave has highlighted, is a hard link of the text to that very specific location in the document, right? Like it's very directly related. But the tag question is a soft link between that highlight and every other highlight that has the word question associated with it, or the tag question associated with it.
But you also can search.
Hang on a second. So just to
go ahead.
This is really important. So
yeah,
in Doug's language, Doug Englebart's language, I would say that those are implicit and explicit links.
Yes. Yes.
So the explicit one is a high resolution link, which is so important and hardly ever exists.
Yeah.
What I find interesting about this is annotations is something I've stayed away from because it's just a whole big world in and of itself. I'm inside.
It's a nightmare.
Yeah, and the thing is, my PhD is about citations and all kinds of things. I've studied the histories going back to the Middle Ages of this stuff. And it's basically people saying stuff about things, really simple.
Point at, point of.
Yeah, so what you're talking about here is really, really crucial. And before I give some other comments, I read a article here about the search for extraterrestrial life. And they said that it would be life that what is that Star Trek quote? It's life as we know it, right?
Yeah.
So these researchers call that kind of life, they don't use the I, they use the Y, life. Have the bigger definition. And you, of course, are using Y in highlighter.
Right.
So I thought that was nice because with annotations as they are inherited from the previous analog world, what needs to be created now has to be something entirely different.
Yep.
And that's what I'm going to show you because.
Yeah, but hang on, let's just stay here a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just a little bit longer. But I have to reply to my wife just with a quick yes, kind of a thumbs up message. There we go.
That was his preparation for another comment, Dave.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
I'm waiting.
Yeah. So the thing is, like we talked about the language for creating a link, so much, because as you said, David, in the beginning, we talked about Raskin and how the system is in the user's head. I think it may be really good for you guys to spend a day or so with people maybe like me and just talk on paper for a little bit. Because it seems like you're doing incredibly interesting things inside the system. But you are having to show me too much. Right? You're doing this because of that. That's something that iteratively is really, really hard to make more apparent. For instance, the act of making a question, which we talked about, is very different from making a comment. And I can completely understand why you're using tagging as kind of the storage mechanism for that. No question, that's cool. So here's the thing. Let's say if I am looking at this document here and it says New Generation Robotics, if I were to select that and just, let's say on my keyboard, hit the / key, which is lowercase with a question mark, that would be a really quick way for me to indicate I have a question about it. But
Cool.
Then, right? But then what? If I just have it as a question, that's meaningless. Because other than being a bad teacher and doing it to a student, we would have to use the rest of your system for me to actually write that question. So I'm just looking at ways of, because when you have tags, you can basically do anything. And if you really focus on some use cases for, since we're both in the same space, a working student-teacher relationship here, which is good. So if you can, you may very well have done this. I know I'm preaching to the choir, so if it's patronizing, it's just
No, not at all. Yeah.
Okay. So if you say this is now a teacher reading this, and it's a student paper, what are the possible things? Because you've developed so much, it may be time to go back to do that. And also, if you are a student reading a new paper that you have found, is different from reading a paper you were assigned, because the teacher will have different expectations. And then finally, how will the teacher want to review your comments to give them an impression whether you read it properly or not? That kind of stuff.
So, I mean, let me say this, that we have quite a lot of experience with student-teacher relationships using Highlighter.
I can see that.
And have developed some really, I will say, super cool interactions, which we couldn't implement because the architecture was so bad from the original Highlighter. So I think what you're suggesting makes total sense from the standpoint that what Dave is doing is trying to get the underlying architecture to be a little bit more like our brains with plasticity that we're finding, right? Which we didn't have before. This current version is very difficult to adapt. But what you're suggesting is, I think once we just get the fundamentals. Go ahead, Dave. You jump in.
No, I was. Go ahead.
Guys, just wanted to welcome Gunter is coming in. I think he's currently without audio or video. Let's just see. Please continue, but just please be aware.
Yeah. So all I was going to say is that I've now forgotten what I was going to say.
I
All right,
apologize.
so
I'm sorry.
all right, so let me
No,
do
no, no.
this. Let me do this. So I would say what I'm showing you right now
Wait.
isn't the product, right? This is sort of a sideshow of Highlighter. The main show is about I'm about to
Just
show
pull
you.
up one of your mashups.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm gonna. So let me just. So you see here. I mean, your question about identifying questions. So my background is in learning sciences, and obviously the ability to generate questions that are meaningful is a key to how you develop understanding and deep knowledge in a space. And the idea that you could have a team of people generate questions and then prioritize those questions and then distribute the work of trying to address them, all kinds of possibilities here. But so the base, and you can see you can do things like add images to and so forth. So what happens is you have a document, you have a collection of documents, and you start saying, oh, I want this one over in the right margin, and oh, I want this one, et cetera, et cetera. And you end up, so here's what's going on here. I have 182 highlights from about 40 documents, 30 documents. And what happened was Chris North, who is a leading AI guy at VTU, sent me 4 papers on his research. I imported them to Highlighter, marked them up, and then I did this thing that I call mental deflection, right? I would come across something like incremental formalism is a term he uses. And this is, for AI that can work with a small amount of data. And I go bring in a paper on that. And then I go and bring in something else and so forth and so on. I create, and this is going back to our conversation. What happened was after about a week of reading and then creating this high trail, which was originally about 100 highlights. And what I do is I review it. Now notice when I click, it takes me to the exact location in this document where this came from, which happens to be. And then, I've tagged it and you see there's the title. And this I was just using to point people to some YouTube videos of Chris's work. And now I'm starting to tell my story, right? And some of my comments get a little lengthy, but and I've tagged that and so forth. And so you could follow my preferred pathway through this collection of documents to tell a story and instantly go from the high trail where this fragment is in gray, my comments in white, to the exact location in the document so you can see the actual context, right, and what's around it. Now, what happens is, as I explained to you, is at a certain point, so I'm putting in comments and my comments are kind of weak from my perspective. I don't quite get it. And then after about a week, 10 days of this, I wake up one morning and all of a sudden, bing, bing, bang, right? I'm just flashing insights right and left. And it's like, oh, and like what I said to you is I think what happens is, chance favors the prepared mind. It's incremental learning up to a point, and then you sort of hit a flash point where you have fluid and crystal intelligence is sort of coalesced in a way that you are now capable of thinking originally inside, coming up with new ideas within the domain and more easily linking what you know to new information. And I've just been on a roll ever since. And it was out of that process that, after working on Highlighter all these years, I began to recognize, oh, Highlighter is a frame building tool. I'm taking these pieces of information from all these different sources, telling a story. A story is a frame. In data frame theory, the quintessential frame is a narrative structure, a script, a storyboard, how you organize information. And then I started a conversation with Chris and some other AI people. Would it be possible for the machine to construct my framing model from looking at adjacent highlights? Because if you go through this, you'll see that each highlight has some coherence. You don't just randomly jump from one fragment and comment to the next. There's a storyline here, and it's all making sense. Anyway, that's And so having said that, the other thing I'll say is you can look at this system, and people have, and they'll come up with 1,001 other uses. The one that I'm most interested is in how do you create conditions for insight and serendipity when you're doing, you know, deep reading and document-centric learning. Because I think from an educational standpoint, our learning system is broken. We're not preparing students to do what I'm doing here, which is to make sense of large amounts of information, to come up with something new and valuable. And then to do that with a group of people becomes even more interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And as we've talked about a little bit before, I just want to say briefly hello to Gunter. Can you hear us? You can right now. Gunter, can you say hello?
So he's chatting.
Yeah, he's typing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he's adjusting his microphone. Right. Okay, well, you're doing that, Gunter. This system is, no, oh, where are you going?
Yeah. Right.
Oh,
I don't know.
it was nice to see. It was nice.
Yeah, yeah. Whoops. Hold on. I'm going back.
Oh, you're on the
Okay.
beach again.
Yeah.
Right. It must be quite scary for you at this point because you have very, very big ideas. And from what you're saying, you've done an implementation and now you have to redo the core structures, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where we had to redo the back-end server-side stuff, which Dave is most of the way through now.
A lot of the way through.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
A lot of the way through. Yeah, we have a ways to go.
So the thing is, since you did sound like you wanted some perspective, that's what I'll give if you don't mind.
Please.
Actually, let me tell you what I'm doing because I think it's analogous. I think this is very, let me share the screen and then we go back to this because I think I can better explain what I mean to say about this. Right, so I'll do the share screen. So here is Reader, as you both know. As you probably know, if you click on any text and do Command F, it shows you all the occurrences of that in the document. In that case, let's do hypertext. There it is. So that is, of course, useful. And of course, it's not anywhere near the multiple massive connected thing you're building, but you can at least see in the document where people have, or the same author has referred. So let's say you're reading something as simple as a novel, and if you get a character, you do that, you see the first time they were introduced. So this is the new thing. Here I've selected author, I do Command F, and I get all of these, but at the top. Oh, are we back?
Yeah.
Right, so when I do something like author or reader, there is a glossary definition at the top of the screen.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Where did that come from? You have a glossary.
That's exactly the thing, because in the same way that for decades, hang on, let me just do it like this. I have been thinking of annotations and not daring touching, as you so well know, it's massive. Glossaries can be massive too. The issues I've had, and I've written over 100 blog entries over the years on it, and a few weeks ago, this is what happened. A glossary term can be in a database, it can be in the document, it can be in a blog, it can be many places. How do you deal with the fact that definitions will change? And by the way, my definition of a glossary is exactly Doug's. It is a definition for that document or that author. So it's a local definition, just to make sure we're talking about the same thing. So all I've done is use the Visual Meta style of work. So this user in author, that's not the one. I'm just going to open it here. Sorry, that's not it either. Thanks, probably this one. Oh, sorry, I'm being so disorganized today.
No problem.
probably this one. So yeah, so in Author, all I have done as a user is add a heading called glossary. And then underneath that, lots of text.
Mm-hmm.
The way it is parsed when it's exported and going into Reader is that any text that is bold is the term.
Mm-hmm.
Any text that is not bold is the definition.
The definition. Yeah.
That's the whole thing. So if I now do augmented copy, because this is a normal page, that comes up there, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So can I jump in here for?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm gonna, this might be something you'd be interested in working on with us.
Yeah, I'd love to, but hang on. The reason I'm not, oh, sorry, I thought you were going to refer to this. The reason I'm showing you this, because I'm not just suddenly having fun because I think this is cool.
Right.
This is a very, very simple use case,
Right.
right? And it's the simplicity that I want to kind of really hammer home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Any word processor can make a heading called glossary. And as long as they follow the logic of bold, not bold, they have a fully working glossary.
Mm-hmm.
All they need to do if they're making a new document is copy the text over into the new document.
Mm-hmm.
So when we go back to, I'm going to stop sharing screen. I'm going to full screen you guys again. What you guys are doing, what I would really like to see is you choose a couple of extremely simple, every student has to do this, and forget everything else for a while. You asked for my advice, I'm going to give you the most annoying advice in the whole world, which is to focus, because we all tell us that, and that's what my friends tell me about my work. Because you're basically, what you are doing, as far as I see, is instead of having the documents as nodes and these other things as connecting, you're using the documents kind of as almost like, when you play pinball, those little things. They're just not that important. It's the new text that's important.
Mm-hmm.
So you are completely changing what annotation, highlighting, and meta dialogue is. That's really, really huge. So that's why it would be really, really nice to see something as simple as the glossary. People add some stuff there and it can be accessed here.
Well, can I, let me throw this idea out to you. So when I didn't think I showed you the original highlighter experience where this idea came from was when I tried to write my first paper for publication. I'm a graduate student at FSU. And what I realized, and it came as a shock, right? Because I wasn't very sophisticated as doing scholarship, is, hey, I'm reading these different documents and people are using this term like collaboration to mean different things, and they're not even defining what they mean.
Yeah.
Right. So the problem with the glossary is what Brown and Duguid have this famous article on called Situated Cognition, blah, blah, blah. And what they say is that concepts are like tools of the trade that people within a field, a community of use to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
And the meaning is in how you used the concept in the context that it's in. And so what you'll find when you go in, especially cognitive science is notorious for this, you'll find the same term being used many different ways, and you'll see different terms that are used to mean the same thing. So what I wrote about this in my social machine for transdisciplinary research. The biggest problem on the planet right now, in some ways, as far as how are we going to solve the myriad problems that we're facing, is the fact that people within different disciplines, that sanctioned cognitive bias thing I was talking about, speak different languages. And there isn't a good way to convey those languages in an efficient way so that when we work together, we're not confused by the language, let alone trying to work on solving the problem.
Absolutely.
So I was looking at your simple glossary structure and wondering if there was a way to adapt it for what I'm calling a concordance. So if the term collaboration comes up, you might get your glossary definition because there may be, here's a definition, but what you would get is a high trail of exemplary highlights from multiple documents showing how that term was used in different ways, in different contexts by different authors, but are still considered, you know, different shades,
Representative.
representative. And then where it gets interesting is those highlights are marked by discipline, so that you can see if you're in a cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary team, each team brings their concordance with them. And then when you click on the word, it gives you, well, here's what the physicists say when they mean energy. Here's what the chemists mean by energy. Here's what, and they're examples, yes, with the definition, but with the use cases from Highlighter. Yeah.
What I've often said to Dave is the biggest problem is not understanding, it's misunderstanding.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. So I agree with the problem statement. I agree with the direction very much, but my concern is some of these groups that I've been part of, especially when you have Californians or involved, get.
Well, they're getting burned out anyway, so.
I'm not saying that they are. I'm not saying that this is what you're saying, but an extreme version of what you're saying would be, I have a knowledge graph. You have a knowledge graph. Oh, we understand each other. It pisses me off like no one's business. It's like, you know, anyway, but what is really positive about what you're saying is what Doug would call view specifications and navigation, right? This is where it gets really, really exciting, because the user should always have the freedom to change how they're viewing what's going on. On a simplified level first, my kind of glossary, called augmented glossary, because everything is suddenly that, it could be as simple as the word I. So I do, you know, I, and then I say, I am Norwegian, I live in London, blah, 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 in the glossary. Reason is someone could read something I've written and have no clue who I am. Right. So you can select that word and they see who I am. So there's an example sentence I use. I went to university and talked to Wendy. So much stuff in there, right? Wendy, she's Dame Wendy Hall, she's my advisor. University is so-and-so. And when she's no longer my advisor, doesn't matter, in that document she is forever, right? So to take that, what you're saying of someone reading in a highlighter style, and if they are required by a teacher, which is I'm sure part of your framework, to define stuff for themselves, then they, you know, as they have to define, of course they are learning. So if you could combine it with exactly what you're saying, I am learning it in my field to mean this. I mean, the word design itself has so many different meanings depending on field, right? Then I would ask you the question of, in what cases would someone else, when do you interact with that other human from another field? Because I think that almost has to be explicit, right? Because when you're in your field and doing just your field stuff, your job is to get immersed in that. But then, of course, even if you're not in a conference or whatever it might be, you may want to look at it from a different perspective, of course. But I think that is an explicit act. So if you can bring to bear the powers that you provide for someone to say, okay, these are my definitions. Give me some alternatives or something. I think what you're going for there could be quite incredible. Because it's about supporting curiosity, right?
Right.
So,
and the other, go ahead, Dave.
So this is, I want to take this in an interesting direction, maybe it's kind of a meta conversation for me, which is what I fell in love with about Highlighter was I was really curious about artificial intelligence research. And I do not have a college degree. And as I started to go back to school and was raising a young family, I decided that I knew what I needed to do to get jobs in software engineering, and so I stopped. When I came to David's system for me, so the conversation model, the way that I arrange highlights, the underlying artifact or unit is the aggregate is called a conversation. And a conversation can have speakers and listeners. And machine components can be speakers or listeners. We've actually had in the past an integration with a machine intelligence tool that would actually analyze a document, identify all of certain types of entities, and actually mark up the document to tell you where it was, where those entities were. And it would actually do resolution of pronouns at multiple different versions of something, like the airport. If earlier it had been Ronald Reagan Airport, it would be able to, dereference all those kinds, parts of speech analysis and other things. It was very interesting. But what it dawned on me is that human beings in communication, documents, are actually engaged in a sharing, and that in that sharing, there is this dynamic feedback between the people where we are able to affect each other's understanding of the world through communication, right? It's this indirect influence. My guess on intelligence is that the human brain is actually is composed of multiple idiot savant components arranged in a particular way to cause an emergent phenomena that is greater than the sum of the parts, appears to be, right? And so right now what we see in artificial intelligence is the development of some pretty incredible idiot savant components that can do some very interesting analysis. But until we get those components into conversation, and specifically into conversation both with each other and with human beings to give them feedback, we don't really have a mechanism for trial and error evolving towards this higher level of intelligence that was articulated, right? So for me, Highlighter is about actually being able to take what's happening inside of the brain and start to introspect it, and then exo position.
Reify is the word.
Right, reify it out into a data structure that we can look at. It's an experimental, there's some experimental aspects. And so, when some of the things Dave's talking about, for me, it's about trying to figure out how to say what I know, but it's also how to understand how to say what I know. One of the things in what you were saying is, right, when contextualizing so many times when a human being speaks, when you said that a word means something within a location, it means like the location is there, right? Everything that I'm saying has meaning in a location.
And time.
If I'm lucky, yes, at a specific point in time, right? And that location is inside my head, right? This is representational of what's going on inside my head. If I'm lucky, then what I mean maps up with something in your head sufficiently that you understand me, right? And that's what's actually happening. So, being able to very clearly place out into a space where we can work with it, what's happening inside a human brain. Because one of the things Dave and I talked about yesterday is, if you get when we were talking about expert performance, if you get an expert to describe what he does, you're going to get the story of what he does. When you go down and record what he does, you will see the actual behaviors. And those two may not match up. Both are interesting, but the behaviors are probably more important, right? So we don't always report the truth about what's happening. We report our belief about what's happening, right? And all of these things, I think there's a ton of really, really valuable insight to be gained by figuring out how to, I don't know what the term would be. I'm going to come up with exoposition, like position outside of us some artifacts that represent what we think is going on, and then use that through iteration and evolution to develop a richer understanding and richer tooling.
Yeah, well, that's the grail that's shared.
Yeah,
absolutely. What I would really like to see with you guys is an end user interface that doesn't have a document in it. I would like to see how you manipulate only highlights.
Well, I have that.
Okay, that would be great.
Well, you have something that looks like that. I'd like to hear more about what you think that is.
Okay. So we have ideas for representing what's over here in lots of different ways, right? So we're just starting out with this, but I can close the document panel, and I can even close the session panel, and all I have is highlights, right? And what I do is I'm going to go down to the bottom, because what happens is when new stuff comes in, it goes to the bottom, and then I decide where to put it. So here, Johnson points out idea is not a single thing, but like a swarm, liquid network, blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to just arbitrarily move this. I'm going to say, you know what? This belongs up in slot 12. And so I go over to actually, I have to do this to see the menu. I go over to move highlight.
I got to fix that.
Yeah. Go over to move highlight, and I scroll up to, and we're going to do a thing where you can just click and it'll take you right to the top. So I could say, okay, I'm going to put it at the top. I want it here in slot 2.
This view could be,
There it is.
this could be really magical. It's powerful now, but it could be really magical, I think.
Okay.
I think.
So can we actually talk about that? Because one of the things I was thinking of, I watched the simplicity of your interface, and one of the things that's been, I hadn't thought about it earlier because I've been focused on other stuff, but one of the things that's really fascinating to me is the idea of dramatically simplifying these representations.
Yeah,
this representation right here.
It should look like magical paper, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, like, why do I have to have all this information about who wrote it? Just put the raw content. And then if I mouse over or I do a click behavior or something else like that, I can get additional detail.
Let me just jump in on Frode. I am anxious to get the reference information in place, because what my experience in the past has been is, when I did this first use of highlighter, it was all paper, and I had a shorthand reference appended to every highlight. So that what happened is, over time, I had chunked. When I saw something from, Brown and Duguid, 1989, I could recall the other 8 things that were from that document, because in my review, I was constantly reviewing, where did that come from? Who said it? So having the reference information associated with the highlights is a real useful memory tool, just mentioning that, which again is going to feed my ability to do the magic, which is the associative learning and memory skills of the human brain that machines are not quite so good at. And that's where new ideas come from, to quote Johnson here.
I would say that absolutely, very much so. And this comes in my world under addressing and linking. Because as you know, having implemented proper high resolution linking, you can't address something if you can't address it. Right.
So what were you gonna? So go. I'm really interested in the.
So on that, it is about the interaction. For instance, in the glossary thing, many would want me to highlight terms that are in the glossary. That makes it a mess.
Yes.
So the reason I did it like that is, people know who use my software, select text, Command F, you get stuff. It's a known thing. Everybody knows Command F. So I'm thinking, in this environment, if you provide interactions that provide certain things that are standard, but then can also provide more when available, then you provide more, and I can't think of a better word right now, interaction opportunities. Right?
Yes.
For instance, this view here, first of all, I hate the fact that it's in a browser. Of course, it should be full screen, but that's where we are right now. You should be able to turn these into, these are ideas I'm sure you've had, so it's just chat, but.
Not necessarily.
Okay, well, maybe you've had 90% and maybe there's a percent you haven't, but turn them into little cards. Choose the icons. Do you want to view it by people? Maybe on the keyword you press P and you get all the names of the people or portraits coming. Maybe that's not interesting. With the visual memory you talked about, maybe you press I and you see only images that you have annotated. Right, and then you can choose to do timeline or not, left to right, because all of these things have been recorded in time as well as space, like we just talked about. There are so many interactions.
Yeah, that you're actually saying. I met this guy, Chris Weber. He's one of the leading bioinformatics guys in the country. He's at Harvard Medical School, and he looked at highlighter, and his reaction was, "Wow, take this data, and there's a million ways you could display it to make it, to interact with it in different ways. But
Yeah.
let me throw one other idea out, Frode, for you to think about, which again, I have a strong bias in how I use the system because I'm trying to come up with original ideas and insights, right? That to me is the opioid of Highlighter. And the way it works is trusting in this process of arranging these highlights so that there's a coherent flow of information, and then reflecting on the coherence, what that is, the adjacent highlights, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, thinking about what's missing here, what could I add, going out, finding information to stick in between, to elaborate more, or to fill in, you know, a question that was raised. And what's happening is, through that review process, I'm creating the conditions for insight, right? It's almost just trust in the process, and you're going to get there at a certain point.
So a question then.
What's that?
So a question then becomes, what's the most important output of that? Is it a PDF to hand in to a teacher, or is it the student aha moment, or is it something else?
Okay, so there's three things going on here.
Okay.
Number one is, by juxtaposing related ideas that come from different authors, which is often what happens, not all the time, but often you'll have sections of your high trail, let's say talking about, you know, distributed intelligence from Malone's perspective versus somebody else's and somebody else's. So you're in the cockpit or the bird's eye view, and you're saying, well, here's what he said, and she said, and she said, and he said, what do I think? And you get these moments of synthesis, right? The creative synthesis, where you come up with something new as a result of linking
Right. So that's,
your own.
So the result there is a thought in the user's head.
Right, that's one.
Yeah.
The second, the output of the system, is and I've done this for myself, and what I'm going to do with this high trail is, here's what I'm doing is I'm going to share it with a bunch of people, and you could be one of those people if you want to take the time, get input, and there's different ways you can give input where I get to see what you're thinking and then say, oh, that would fit right in to slot 4, or, oh, as a result of your comment, I'm going to update my comment on slot 2, whatever. I integrate whatever I can get from other people that are interested.
So that's
in work
for dialogue, right?
Dialogue, right? And then I'm going to create, well, actually, even before I do that, for the benefit of those people, I'm going to write a summary. Here are the main ideas, the new ideas that I came up with.
Right.
And so here's a summary describing how I created the high trail, and a list and description of the main ideas, insights that emerged. And then I'm also going to create, which I'm tentatively calling my associative trail, how I started with a core seed documents, and then I went and looked at these concepts that emerged.
We're kind of over time, and I'm afraid I have a meeting coming up. But
okay.
So one is the insight for the user. The second one is to publish a document, which can be, of course, in this format, for feedback from a community.
Right.
And I guess that would also be similar to handing in to a teacher, or what's the third one?
Well, the third one is a summary with a list of all the questions that I've raised or my team has raised as a result of this process, along with a kind of knowledge graph of the associations that emerged in the process, where we went off and brought in new stuff that wasn't in the original starting point, to sort of see how things sort of expanded, deflected into new areas.
A lot of that sounds like normal student stuff. A lot of it sounds like quite advanced student stuff. So what I think would be really beneficial is to make it extremely clear, a whole scenario walkthrough. Mm-hmm. Because, for instance, with the Author, my word processor, even though it's much simpler than what you're doing, it's easy for me to think about augmented mind, extended cognition, all that stuff that we're all talking about. But at the end of the day, the work product is a document. I have to remember that. So you know, if you, just since, you know, you asked from my perspective, if you could show the really clear, student looks at this, talks to class, and hands that in, and make it more explicit rather than kind of hidden in tags, that would be interesting.
Well, so I did so just real quick, I did a 6-week pilot project with 2 high school students, and they each read 15 documents, marked them up, shared them with each other, and then wrote summaries and generated a set of questions. And I had a professor from GWU sit in, and she said she's never seen anything like it from high school students. So I'm suggesting that what you're saying is, oh, too complex? I don't think so. I think the system scaffolds the complexity.
I'm not saying it's too complex at all.
No, I mean the higher order thinking stuff that, you know, people can engage in. Now, yeah, there are some students that aren't ready for that, but
let's make sure we don't abuse him of his time. And let's also, I'd like to say goodbye and thank you. And I'd also like to know, I guess we can come back, I guess, next week if you're here again.
Yeah, Mondays and Fridays, same time.
Okay.
Well, Frode, do you see any?
I'd love to talk with you more, Frode.
Yeah.
I look forward.
And
Yeah, I
Frode,
really
would you be
appreciate your
interested in participating in a highlighter exercise once I get this ready to go?
Yeah, I would be interested in doing that. But yeah, let's talk again. Very nice talk. And Gunther, I just invited you at the last minute, but maybe we can talk on Monday, same time. Gunther's also coming into the community with hypertext perspectives.
Oh, cool.
Can you hear me? Oh, sorry.
There you are.
Quality is a bit bad. Oh, great. Yeah, very interesting presentation. Yeah, unfortunately, I jumped right into the middle of it, but yeah, but I'd love to meet you again next week. Would be great.
Okay.
So is it Monday at 11? Is the same slot?
Monday, same time. I will put this presentation today, this dialogue, online if you don't mind.
No, please do.
Okay. Thanks,
All right.
guys. Have a
Thank you.
wonderfully
Nice to meet you,
relaxed
Frode.
weekend. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Goodbye.